Hi and welcome to this demo on how to create aggregates. We will need to assign the disks to the nodes. We will create one aggregate with 16 disks and a RAID group size of 8. So that will give us 2 RAID groups. But before we do that, we list the existing aggregates. And as we see, we have 2 aggregates already, 1 per node. These 2 aggregates were created during the cluster setup. This is done automatically. Now in day-to-day operations you don't really touch these aggregates. They're very important because they contain configuration information and log files and a lot more, but they definitely do not contain user data and never will. So for now we can forget about them because we want to create data aggregates. Now before we create our first data aggregate we have one more thing to mention. A disk that is connected to a controller also has to be owned by that controller. Otherwise, the node will not be able to use the disk. And a node can be made owner by assigning the disk to the node. Now let's have a look at the disks and see whether they are all assigned to one particular node. So we run disk show -fields owner. And we see that there are some unassigned disks. And when we scroll up, we see that node 1 seems to have all of its disks assigned. But node 2 does not. Now since the simulators do not share the disks, we can assign all disks to one particular node. And we can do that twice, once for each node. Now please keep in mind that in real life you will run an HA pair, in which all disks are usually divided between the 2 nodes. So you will not assign all disks to a single node, usually. But as I said, since the simulator is a shared nothing environment, you can safely assign all disks to a particular node. So we run disk assign all true to node 2. And after that we can run disk show owner again. And now we see that all disks have been assigned to the nodes. Now let's create an aggregate. We're going to create an aggregate with 16 disks and the size of the RAID groups will be 8. So we'll end up with 2. The name of the aggregate will be node1 agg1 and it will be connected to node 1. So we run aggregate create. The aggregate is node1 agg1, the disk count is 16 and the max RAID size is 8 and the node is node 1. Now before the aggregate is actually created it prompts us if we're sure that we want to do this. And as we can see we have 2 parity disks per RAID group and the RAID groups are 8 disks in size. The default parity, by the way, is determined by the type and the size of the disks you're using. And in a second we'll see how to not use the default RAID type. So you can manually decide what type you want to use. So we confirm and then we run aggr show fields RAID type and we see that we've only got dual parity aggregates. Then we run aggr show fields max RAID size and we see that we have 2 aggregates with 16 and 1 aggregate with 8. So the aggregate is created and it's ready to receive client data. And since we're busy anyway, let's create an aggregate for node 2 as well. So we have 2 aggregates to work with. Now we create this aggregate and we will use 16 disks but without specifying the RAID group size. And we make sure that we use 3 parity disks, so we run the RAID tech. And again it makes us confirm and after that we have 2 aggregates in place. And we're done. And if you want to have another look at the most important commands in this demo, I listed them here. Also, please take a note of the max RAID size and RAID type arguments.